So now that we have a grasp of what tools are at our disposal and a basic understanding of how to set ourselves up for success with our inputs and where to send all that signal, let's take a look at our end goal. An engineer, which is what you are by the way, is an integral part of the band. Just as important as the guitarist, lead singer, bassist, or any other member on the stage, and even if you don't have a formal training in an instrument in the conventional sense, a hearty appreciation for music is a great first step for anyone looking to be involved in mixing. Listening critically, focusing in on parts, and how the engineers mixed a song or used a certain sound are great tools to help develop your art. Although you may not have 100% say over how things should sound, it is up to us to do our best to interpret and best represent the artist and their music. So what are the steps in achieving a balanced mix, you might ask? The terms placement in the mix or leaving space in the mix are often used in reference to mixing, but what does that mean? In a previous chapter, we chatted about EQing briefly, and while we want to represent each instrument accurately when creating our mix, we may be required to apply some slightly more drastic EQ measures to avoid any sort of clashing in the mix. For example, if we have two guitar players that sound relatively close, we can boost or cut different frequencies so that each guitar stands out on their own without turning each one up. As you build your mix, checking each part of the band individually, typically starting with your foundational instruments like drums, then bass, then guitars, horns, keys, and onto your vocals, keep in mind your eventual overall volume. Typically speaking, we want to have our vocals heard above the rest of the band, blended but still in the forefront. Some quick tips. Make sure that your kick drum and bass guitar are complementing each other. Don't try to get as much bottom end out of the kick drum as you can, and then try and do the same with the bass. Let them work together, and we do that using our EQ. Make sure that your guitars and keyboards each have a bit of space to themselves. Again, always considering where you want your vocals to go. Another area that will help in getting clear vocals is to take full advantage of our high-pass filter. And if you're on a simpler analog mixer which doesn't have a variable high-pass filter, we can use the lower bands of our EQ to pull out the low and low-mid non-essential frequencies. This is essential in allowing the vocals to remain clear in the mix without simply boosting volumes, resulting in what many refer to as a wall of sound. When we try to hear each piece in the puzzle by simply turning up the volume, we will end up with a very muddled sound. Creating space with EQ, as well as across the stereo spectrum if it's available, will yield a much more pleasing sound. Panning, as it's referred to, is the act of placing channels off the center mark to either the left or right side of the PA, and typically this is done to match what the listener sees on stage. Yet another step in achieving a pleasant listening experience is making sure that the proper parts to the song are highlighted, being aware of the general outline of the material so that the lead vocals are up front in the mix when they should be, and the instrument solos are in the spotlight when they should be. It just adds to that next level of professionalism to the mix. If you're working with different groups from event to event, asking for a set list with notes highlighting these areas is a great step to not only show you care, but also to be prepared for the show.